Welcome to this video in which we look at Old Town Road and specifically at the key concept of representation. So perhaps we could start with the representation of gender in Old Town Road, and I think it's quite important to look at the two different time frames here, and we're offered a juxtaposition straight away in terms of two particular scenes. The young female that is in the deserted cowboy house, she's worried when outsiders come. Is this part of a female victim stereotype? And of course what she does is call for her daddy, who responds with violence, aggression. So you have that male aggression and the female sort of very much being scared of male violence, I suppose. And we can juxtapose that with when Lil Nas X arrives in 2019, and of course he arrives at the feet of a young boy, and the boy's response is not to call for his daddy, is actually to call to his mummy. And I wonder whether that's quite a nice contrast in terms of how gender representation has moved on between those centuries. I think also we're asked later on in the scene to look at the way that the young girl dances against Lil Nas X. So Quan, I think that's, I don't know how to spell her name, but that's what she's called, isn't she? And she has the confidence, I suppose, to be able to look Lil Nas X in the eye and to do her dance in response to his dance. And I think we're very much asked to look at the two as equals in many ways in terms of that. So I think all of that speaks to the fact that perhaps we can see a far greater gender equality in 2019 than we're asked to do in the very brief extract in 1899 that we see in the video. And that's borne out later on, I think, in the bingo hall, where we very much have a mixed gender line dancing and mixed gender playing, and in fact it's actually a female bingo caller that's actually in charge of the whole scene, really. And of course it's the female that signifies right at the end to Lil Nas X that he is accepted by that community. So I think we can look at gender in that way. I mean, if we wanted to really look for gender stereotypes, and Judith Butler would say looking at gender performativity, then we do have the shot of young Keo, isn't it, with the wrench in his hand as his mate or father is looking into the hood of a car. So men equals cars, and we also have the women in more domestic settings, as Van Zunen would say, and where she's watering the garden, and I think that's there to be looked at. Us as media analysts, are we looking into it too deeply? Probably, but we're there to see that normalisation of representations of gender and how that's reinforced by this video. The other key area to look at in terms of representation clearly is the representation of the black community. And I think this is very much linked in with Barthes's work on myth, and in particular the cowboy myth in terms of America. Later on in the video, of course, Billy Ray Cyrus refers to the Marlboro Man, and this idea of the strong, lonely, unsmiling white cowboy is very much enshrined, it seems, in American culture, and is quite a long way from what we have with Lil Nas X. And in a way, I think Barthes would say that the idea of that white cowboy has been almost monetized over the years and become part of a cultural reference point in a way for Americans. And Lil Nas X counters that clearly. In that initial scene, we have him having robbed the bank, which might tap into that idea that the black community are represented, I suppose, in ways that are dangerous. I'll get onto Alvarado in a minute. Chased by a group of sort of representatives of the law in terms of those cowboys, and they're all black. Now, I think that having done some research on that, and it doesn't take a lot, we can see that actually the idea of the lonely white cowboy, the strong sort of never smile, walking into the town with a couple of guns on, is part of that myth. And the cowboys that actually operated in the late 1800s and early 1900s in America were often black, and so I do think that myth is really being tapped into and being played with by Lil Nas X in terms of this. And the contextual part of that, of course, relates to country and western charts, Billboard saying that actually you're not country enough, and Lil Nas X turning that on its head and saying, well, actually, is the implication here is that I'm black and I don't fit in. And I think when we look at the black community, it's interesting again to look at the 1899 and 2019 difference. The white protector of the girl, the older guy with the gun, actually only shoots the black man, doesn't he? And Billy Ray Cyrus does not get shot at, and whether that persecution, if you like, or that singling out of the black cowboy as opposed to the white is part of that message. But then when we come round to 2019, Lil Nas X is delivered into a black community, and I think I think that's portrayed in a really positive light, particularly with the character of Vince Staples and the street race that they have. I'm really struck by the fact that Vince Staples loses the race, but does he get angry? Does he react in any way that is negative? And he doesn't. He pays his money, absolutely, and then he has that moment where he looks at Quan, who's on the horse, and he really adopts that high moral tone at that point and saying, that's not what we do. You do leave the man's property alone. I know he follows it up with sort of a get off my car, just to reinforce that property issue. But I'm struck by the fact that it's a very warm community and presented in a very positive light, I feel anyway. I mentioned Alvarado, and I think when we talk about ethnic representation, we do need to talk about his stereotypes that are there, and I think they're there to be had in this video, where we could argue that we do pity somewhat Lil Nas X at the point where he's being pursued, he's being chased on the horse, and then he's shot at, and then he's an outsider. So I think we are asked to pity him a little bit in terms of this video. Of course, he is perceived as dangerous, and which is another one of the Alvarado stereotypes. Arguably, he acts in a humorous way. Another one of his stereotypes, and actually by using the jacket that he does, the over-the-top colourful jacket, there is an exoticism, I think, in terms of the way that he's presented at that point. So I do think we can, with some relevance, apply Alvarado here. When we talk about ethnic representation, we need to talk about Gilroy as well. And as I say to my class, I think Gilroy will be quite pleased in terms of this video and the song itself. Of course, it has that hybridity to it. And I think when talking about the Black Atlantic, Gilroy talks about the idea that cultures need to become enriched as a result of that diaspora, and I think there's a real example of that happening here. So we have the black music, if you like, hip hop, rap, infusing into country, which is we have to say is white music, one would say, and I know we can argue with that, but very much the country and western scene seen as part of the sort of deep south white American genre, and I think the whole video very much is about that acceptance, and not just acceptance but real warmth for that hybrid nature. Both are enriched as a result of Lil Nas X's bringing those two genres together. Having said that, I do think that when we look at the bingo scene, that and of course Lil Nas X is accepted at the end of that bingo scene, and it was touch and go when they opened that door, and it was like, uh-oh, what's going to happen here? Arguably, Lil Nas X needs the help of Billy Ray Cyrus in order to effect that change in their attitude towards him. And I don't think that necessarily detracts from how the black community are represented, but if anything, what it does is reinforce what Gilroy would want, which is that idea that two cultures can actually work together and both become richer as a result of that. I wonder whether it's worth adding on a little bit about the representation of sexuality, in the sense that Lil Nas X talked after the video was produced about the fact that he is gay, and that, I think, in retrospect, and when we watch the text, knowing that that's the fact, then the idea of him being an outsider gains some amplification, I think, at that point. We do have Lil Nas X engaging in some what we might call effeminate dancing when he stood outside the shop, and is it comic? Yes, it's certainly not perhaps dancing that you would see in other country videos, and we do have Billy Ray Cyrus dressed in pink, pink having obvious connotations, feminine connotations, and which is interesting given the fact that I think he is one of a key heterosexual icon, what one would say, if we can frame it in those terms, and being asked to dress in this over-the-top pink cowboy jacket, and it seems very much a determination to say, hey, those existing roles that we thought we had, then we can play with those, and that's very much part of life in 2019, and that's to be celebrated. So I think that's as far as I go on representation with Old Town Road, and I hope that some of those aspects are able to launch discussions perhaps in your own classrooms.